the big picture is the best diet's the one you'll follow. And I think as mentioned earlier, the number one problem with dieting is most people who go on a diet lose weight, but most people regain the weight.
It's about 95%, right?
Well, 50% after the first year, and then it starts to climb to 70, 90% after years 2 or 3. We see in the long-term diet trials comparing placebo to semaglutide, the weight loss medications, over 2 years, that the average weight loss maintenance over a 2-year time period is a 2% weight loss in the general population. Whereas on the medications, it was anywhere from 17 to 23%, depending on which medication. So the point being, without getting distracted on the medication, is that on average, people only are able to maintain about 2% weight loss. And that's on average, understanding that individuals within that study, there's a lot of inter-individual variability. Some people gain significantly more than they lose. Others lose more weight than that. But there's a whole range, and I'm just saying on average. It's difficult to adhere to a diet long term. That's one of the biggest challenges we have. I've said in my obesity rant some 6-7 years ago, it's about changing behavior. That's a lot more difficult, than just working out or what have you. So calories are king. There's no question. And you need to maintain a calorie deficit in order to lose weight. And there's many paths to that destination. I said the best diet's the one you'll follow. If a keto diet allows you to adhere to that diet and allows you to lose weight and maintain a calorie deficit, then that's the best diet for you, the one that feels the least restrictive. If it's intermittent fasting, if it's paleo, if it's Mediterranean, if it's continuous calorie restriction, tracking your diet, your calories. I should say there's really only 3 ways to lose weight, what we call CR, DR, and TR. Calorie restriction is where you weigh and measure your food. That's one way to track your food and make sure you stay in a deficit. That's CR, calorie restriction. Dietary restriction, DR, is where you eliminate certain foods. That's your keto group, eliminate carbs. That's your vegan group. It's your carnivore group. Whatever you eliminate, paleo, everything a caveman didn't eat. If you choose to eliminate things from your diet, you're undergoing some form of dietary restriction. And that can be effective for weight loss, presuming it allows you to maintain a calorie deficit and you can adhere to it. It doesn't feel restrictive to you. You don't binge or overeat or relapse. The other one is TR, that's time restriction. That's your intermittent fasting, whether you do a 16-8 or a 24 or an alternate day fast or multiple day fastings. It all falls under that same category. Those are your 3 options. That's all there are. Every single diet that's ever been invented, including the vertical diet, falls under one of those 3 categories. The vertical diet tends to focus on continuous calorie restriction. We track calories. I ask for pictures of the meals and to use MyFitnessPal so that you can actually keep track of everything that you consume. So you pick one of those 3 paths or a combination thereof. We have the keto intermittent fast group. Remember those guys that, even notable people like Dr. Peter Attia was a big fan of both of those at one time. And he's since moved past that era and has evolved to understand that it is just calories, and however you are able to meet that requirement or restriction, it's whatever best suits you for your lifestyle and you can adhere to long term, then have at it. And I'm not going to argue one being better than the other. If we wanted to talk specifically about performance, I would make some arguments as to the deficiencies of a keto or intermittent fasting diet with respect to top performance for the 1%ers. But generally speaking, whether you eat 2 meals a day or 6 meals a day, when you control for calories and protein, there's no difference in weight loss or body composition between any of those dietary choices. And I think that's a good thing. I'm not trying to, insult anybody's diet plan. I'm trying to say that you have options, you have choices. And that way people don't feel as though if they failed on a particular diet that they thought was the best or the only way, they understand that just doesn't work for them and they can find, an alternate plan. So calories are king. And then you mentioned macros, and I talked about protein. You control for calories and protein. Protein's important. Protein does have a couple of pretty significant benefits. One I talked about earlier was the thermic effect of food. For every 100 calories of protein you consume, you net out about 70. So it's just, you get more food with fewer calories. So, plus protein obviously supports lean tissue, which is, we're focused on fat loss, not muscle loss. And so we want to get sufficient protein to support lean tissue, which from the bulk of the research and the evidence out there seems to be about 1.6 grams of protein per pound of lean weight. So a lean 200-pound person might only need about 160 grams of protein. There's a reason why you might consume more, and that's the third benefit of protein, and that's it's very satiating. And people who are very lean, or people who are older and have anabolic resistance, or people who are trying to diet and have a hard time controlling their hunger, those are all three great reasons where you might eat more protein, a gram per pound or 1.2 grams per pound. There's no evidence that protein has any adverse health effects in those higher amounts. That's from the ISSN. They've done protein overfeeding studies up to 2 and even 3 grams per pound and haven't seen any adverse. That's Dr. Jose Antonio. Hasn't seen any adverse effects for high protein intakes in terms of kidney or liver or anything like that. So you don't need it, but it may be beneficial in a calorie deficit for those reasons mentioned: lean mass retention, satiety, thermic effect of food. So once you've controlled for calories and protein, now you've got carbs and fats. And from the DietFits trial out of Stanford, over 600 participants tracked for a year, they found that it didn't really matter. High protein or high carb, low carb, high fat, low fat, it didn't matter. And really the best diet was the one that you could adhere to. So if you prefer more fats, then eat more fats. If you prefer more carbs, eat more carbs. It becomes the one that becomes a lifestyle that you enjoy. And I know there are people out there that try and purvey the carbohydrate insulin model. We've heard that if you raise your insulin, that you can't burn fat. It's patently false. It's been proven over and over again, as the DietFits trial proved. There was no difference in glycemic index as well. So the carbohydrate insulin model, which is still popular, unbelievable to me because we have so many human randomized controlled trials showing that high carb or low carb or high fat or low fat has equivalent outcomes, health outcomes, fat loss outcomes, blood sugar outcomes, that it's really, I don't know why it's still argued. And generally, it's not argued amongst the domain-specific nutrition professionals, those with PhDs in nutrition. It's argued amongst chiropractors and journalists and other cardiologists who don't have any nutrition training. And they've been called out over and over again on social media. Dr. Jason Fung is an example of one who's a carbohydrate insulin model guy. Dr. Gary Taub's book, Good Calories, Bad Calories, was based on that. I think Nina Teicholz was hers. I forget the name of her book, but same thing. I think these are all carbohydrate insulin model people. More recently, I think Eddie Abu has been very popular recently, talking about you eat sugar, wake the fuck up. And as long as he's swearing and speaking with loudly and with confidence, people tend to listen to him. But the fact is the research doesn't support it. So I don't mean to belabor the point, but it doesn't matter for the general population that we're speaking to. In terms of performance, I would prefer to keep the fats a little lower and put more carbs in because you want to fuel workouts. I would also say this as an aside in terms of general health. We do have compelling evidence, multiple converging lines of evidence with epidemiology, with human randomized controlled trials, and now the genetic Mendelian randomization research showing that higher saturated fat diets will, for a significant portion of the population, increase LDL cholesterol, which is an independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease. Not the only risk factor, but an independent risk factor. And so I would recommend keeping saturated fats under 10% of total calories and getting blood tests to find out just how sensitive you are to ApoB and LDL elevations. So I can't make specific recommendations for fats and carbs to the general population. I just want to say that it's for your personal preference as long as your calories are under control and your protein's sufficient. And to eat now, we've done calories, we've done macros. The next step is going to be micronutrients, and those should be sufficiently satisfied if you get most of your food from whole food sources and have a variety of foods. It can be a lean proteins, lean red meat, chicken, fish, salmon would be preferable because of the omega-3s. Egg white blends if you're trying to control fats, but certainly eggs can be helpful. Dairy, another fantastic one. Stu Phillips, McMaster University, just put forth some good research on dairy showing it has an independent effect on BMI, on body composition, and performance. And so Dairy is a good one, particularly yogurt, because it's fermented, is really good for the digestive system. Again, the Sonnenberg trials out of Stanford showed that 100% of the population of the participants in their studies who used fermented foods had an improvement in diversity and density of their microbiome. So their gut health was improved. Whereas when they did fiber, they found a third of the group had adverse results to fiber because their claim was that they probably had compromised microbiome already, and so they couldn't digest that much fiber. But fiber is still, from all the research, suggests that fiber is beneficial for digestion and for long-term health for those people who can tolerate the fibers, which, my diet talks specifically about types of fibers that might aggravate certain people, the FODMAPs. And I don't know if I should say this last or if we already talked about it first, but knowing now that the calories are king and how to break down your macronutrients and to get sufficient micronutrients from a variety of whole unprocessed foods, you're back to compliance is the science. You're back to how can I adhere to a deficit so I don't get hungry? And that takes us into a conversation about satiety, the types of foods that keep you full. We mentioned protein, we mentioned fiber. There's also a satiety index that rates foods based on people's perception of hunger after they've consumed them. And you can just Google satiety index and see that real high on that list is foods like boiled potatoes and oranges. Certainly high protein and high fiber foods are on there as well. But that's something that I try and utilize satiety. I have a kind of a satiety toolkit. I give people tips on how to stay full, how to replace hyper-palatable, ultra-processed, nutrient-dense foods with more satiating foods in your kitchen, like getting rid of the ice cream and bringing in fat-free Greek yogurt and strawberries or blueberries. Those kinds of swaps need to be there to help with compliance so that you don't end up overeating your snack foods. And keep those other things out of the house. It's not to say they can't be a small part of a balanced diet plan, but it should be onerous in order for you to obtain them. They shouldn't be right there handy. And you should have an alternative, whether it's popcorn or the Greek yogurt or some other alternative that's lower calorie, that's more satiating, that you can sit there and munch on out of habit when you're not really hungry, but you're just, passing some time in front of Netflix at night.
Yeah, and that goes back to making this a sustainable lifestyle, right? It's like, are you really going to go the rest of your life not enjoying some of those foods, but plan them out, be structured in how you do that? Maybe when you're going to have a dessert, have it as a meal out. I don't know if you're somebody that likes to use the word cheat food, right? But, if you just eliminate the things, you keep them out of the house, it's going to be a lot harder. You're not going to drive to the convenience store at 11 o'clock at night. Maybe you would, but then you got another thing you might want to address there a little bit.
Then you got to get back on the horse the next day, but at least that you're less likely to. And that's kind of all we're trying to leverage here is there's going to be anytime you're in a calorie deficit, there's going to be some hunger. We just have to try and make it manageable